Hello, one and all, and welcome to the podcast we call the Fantastival with myself, Steve Nussbaum. In the podcast, where I invite my guests to come on and talk to me all about their musical taste, their memories, their experiences, and they get to collect their fantasy festival, which I have christened Fantastival. We are now on episode number 156, and as you listen to this now, it's early March as 2024 continues to fly by. I've had 2 weeks off for half term, so thank you for bearing with me and thank you for joining me for this episode. And speaking of thank yous, I just want to say a massive thank you to Johnny Marriott for being my guest in episode 155. He was a great guest. He completely understood the podcast, and congratulations to him and his band Pet Needs for their chart position of number 17 in the national album charts last week with Intermittent Fast Living, an absolutely astounding album. I think if you listen to that episode, you remember their campaign to get into the top 40, and not only did they do that, they got into the top 20. So well done to Johnny and Pet Needs, and also a massive congratulations to my guest from episode 153, Mr. John Power from Cast. They released their Love Is The Call album, and that charted last week at number 22. So fantastic work there by both Cast and Pet Needs. So those were previous episodes. I'm all about 156 this week, and I'm delighted to be back and joined by a woman of many, many talents. She's a Manchester-based photographer. She's got extensive experience in music, portrait, brand, and fashion photography. Not only that, she was also in a band called Sister Lovers. I'm very much looking forward to talking to her about. You might remember her name or know her name. She's appeared in the Oasis Supersonic documentary. So ladies and gentlemen, it can only be the one and only, it's Debbie Ellis.
Hi.
Hello, Debbie. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you on. Rob Fidderman has told me so much about you, recommended you on the podcast. I'm really looking forward to hearing all about your photography and kind of your musical tastes and experiences. But I always like to start the podcast by just checking in with my guests, making sure they're all good from a mental health perspective. So, Debbie, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I've had a good day. Yeah, I've been busy editing some of my work, so it's quite a calm atmosphere, environment when I'm doing that. So yeah, my head's in a good place today.
Wonderful. I'm glad your head's in a good place. Hopefully, when we get to collect your fantasy festival, we'll be in the world of pure fantasy and bringing out all the joy and love of music. So, Debbie, I kind of done a basic introduction to you, but for anyone who might be listening and might not know too much about who Debbie Ellis is, tell us a bit more kind of about yourself. Who is the myth and the legend behind Debbie Ellis?
So, well, like you say, nowadays I'm a photographer. I've lived in Manchester all my life. I have been around music all my life. I'm been obsessed with music all my life. But in the past 10 years or so, I got into photography, but I'm still involved in music because I work with a photograph a lot, mainly musicians in the Northwest. So yeah, it's still my number one obsession is, following music.
You mentioned you've been obsessed with music all your life. I guess, when did that obsession start? So can you remember your earliest kind of music memory?
Yeah, I really remember like being in my dad's car and him dropping something off at a house. And my dad's he was a photographer as well. So maybe he was like dropping off some photographs, wedding photographs around at someone's house. And he left me in the car. And I remember hearing, "Oh, bloody, oh, blada," and just listening to the lyrics and just thinking, who are these people? I must have been about 5 years old, and like how, I could picture like the story, because it's a real narrative to that song. So it was, I was picturing this marketplace and these people and just, that I think that's something that stuck in my head. And I think at the time I didn't really know who the Beatles were, but I just remember this song and thinking about who Desmond was and, what life Desmond was leading while I was sat in my dad's car. So, yeah, that was a pivotal moment, I think, in my childhood when I sort of like started listening to words of songs.
And was it always kind of the plan for you to have like a career in music? So obviously, I know you was in a band, and I guess we'll come on to Sister Lovers soon, but was it always a plan for you to try and make it in the music industry from a young age?
Well, when I was like Well, when I was 5, actually, I begged my mum to go to dancing, so that I wanted to be like a Russian ballerina till I was about 14. But even within that, there was a lot of music. So, and the part that I enjoyed most about like ballet class was you'd have this section where they'd play some music, so it'd be like classical music, and that part was where you could make up your own dance. You weren't following like a curriculum, and I just really enjoyed that. And I think that was just the freedom of the music allowing you to like move along to it and make up your own thing. So yeah, I've always sort of like, even through dance, loved the element of music.
And then in terms of, I guess, your band progression, Sister Lovers, was that your first band, or were there kind of bands before that?
I got into house music and I ended up doing a house record with this guy called Andy Robinson, who was a tour manager for New Order. And yeah, so I did a house record before I did Sister Lovers. But yeah, before I got to Sister Lovers, I was kind of fed up with house music and the rave scene. And me and my friend went to Europe hitchhiking, and we hitchhiked around Europe, and we decided when we got back we were going to buy some guitars, because we were kind of fed up with the dance scene. So yeah, I've kind of been into different setups in bands. I suppose I always tried to look for people that were interested in making music and hanging around with those people as well. So kind of jumped ahead a bit there because you've missed out the 80s, but yeah.
I'm always happy to talk about the 80s. So were there defining moments for you then, I guess, within the 80s, I guess, before the period that we've just spoken about?
Yeah, I think in the 80s, it was like, that was the time when I left school. So, whilst I was at school, I was discovering music really through John Peel, listening to really diverse stuff on there, and I discovered a band called The Slits on John Peel that really resonated with me. Obviously, it was a female vocalist, Ari Up, and, all female band. And that made me kind of think that it was possible for a woman to sing in a band or play an instrument in a band. And I got the album cut, and that was something that really led me towards thinking that it was possible to be in a band. Among other things, though, John Peel would play I remember he'd play like Fetus on the Wheel and even The Fall, and I'd go into school, I'd write these names on my book, but realistically, when I was at home and he put those tracks on, I was like turning the volume down because I was like, my brain isn't ready for this. I don't know what this is, but it's like so noisy and horrible and shouted. Whereas like I think the Slits had more melody to them, especially by the time they put out Typical Girls. It was just such a fantastic song.
So a massive influence. I guess John Peel at that point was obviously pre-internet, pre-streaming. The way you would find new bands is through radio shows, right? So John Peel was a massive influence, I guess.
Yeah, so I discovered a lot of music through listening to John Peel, and obviously early 80s, it was such an amazing time for pop music. Even, watching Top of the Pops, I was really into Duran Duran and Human League and, all those like new romantic bands, as they were called then. It was quite short-lived, me wearing like my baggy pants and my frilly shirts. I was laughing the other day with my friend, like Kath Berry, because we were talking about that era. Oh, that was it. I was at my friend's birthday party on Saturday, and Warm Leatherette came on, by The Normal, and I was telling Kath, like, I heard that when I was about 14, and I was into soft cell, so we were borrowing my friend's brother's record. We were playing like soft cell and like dancing around in her bedroom. And then she said, "Oh, listen to this one, it's really funny." So we put it on, and we just like, I remember just lying on a bed laughing our heads off, because it was like just really strange for a song, warm, leatherette. And we're like, what is he saying? What does it even mean? Anyway, so I was talking to my friend Kath, and she was talking about like when she saw anyone that looked like a new romantic, they used to call them Mind of a Toy, after the Visage song. And I was saying, oh, Visage, me and my friend used to do this dance to it, and I was showing her, and it was just hilarious, like the things that you do in like your mate's bedroom. It's like for the getting ready for the youth club on the Friday night, where you would go and drink a bottle of wine before you got in. So yeah, it was just that era was, I think it was like really fun. And, there wasn't obviously no internet and all the rest of it. And you did wait all week to watch Top of the Pops. But there was so many bands from that era that I loved. And actually my first gig was Duran Duran playing at the Apollo in Manchester. And I think they were on the Girls on Film tour. So it's quite early on, but obviously it was packed out. There was these other two girls from the youth club that we kind of just used to give bitchy looks to. And we went to this Duran Duran gig, and me and my friend paid the bouncer £1 to get down to the front. So we ended up stood next to these two girls that we hated from the youth club. Anyway, I managed to have a fight. So with one of them. So it was quite memorable. So I had a bit of a fight at the front, and I'd borrowed my friend's new romantic scarf, and I'd lost that in the scuffle. And then I remember we went outside, and everybody went back to the stage door outside the Apollo, and it was really icy, and all I kept thinking was, God, I hope she doesn't want another fight. I'm just going to fall on my arse outside here. Anyway, as the story goes on, the next week at the youth club, we realised that we were all very similar because we were all at this same gig, and then we all became friends. And one of those girls is like my best friend, Tina Street, to this day.
Wow.
And I've known her since I was 14, so over 40 years of friendship. Yeah.
That's a brilliant story. I guess that just shows you the power of music bringing people together upon reflection, right?
Yeah, even if you have a fight to start off with. But you know what girls are like fighting? It was more like swinging each other around by our frilly blouses. There wasn't any punches being thrown,
So it sounds like you had an amazing musical, I guess, education from a young age through your teenage years, and then, like you said, with the ballet, going into your first band and doing house and then moving into Sister Lovers. It sounds like you had an incredible musical upbringing with loads of different influences swirling around in your head then.
Yeah. And I mean, so after that, when I left school, I did have a bit of a funny phase where it was just trendy, really. You're probably not old enough to remember, but there was a time when being a rockabilly was quite cool. And I think, Morrissey kind of was somebody that was into that look and that kind of music, and it was pre the Smiths. I think it lasted for about 3 months, but I did have a quiff. It wasn't the best look in the world, and we used to go to this club called Berlin, and it was very tribal then, wasn't it? Music, it was you were a rockabilly, or you were a soul boy, or you were a punk. So me and Tina, we were rockabillys for about 3 weeks, and then I remember going to the Hacienda and meeting the DJ there called Andrew Berry, who is actually Kath Berry, who I've just mentioned. It's her brother. And he was big friends with Johnny Marr. And I just remember seeing him, and he had this Beatles haircut and a polo neck jumper on and a diamante necklace, and thinking, and Ray-Bans. And I just thought, wow, who's that? And he introduced me and my friends to the Velvet Underground. And, obviously that's where he got his look from. And I'd never heard of them, and I'd never heard of anything like it. And so from rockabilly to, Edie Sedgwick within 4 months. So, that kind of transformed, my musical taste, because from the Velvet Underground, I just, explored everything from the 60s then.
Amazing. It sounds like at the same time, when you're going through your musical education, you're also meeting a very similar, like-minded bunch of people. Yeah. People have gone on to have, I guess, decent careers in the music industry as well, by the sounds of it.
Yeah. Well, Andrew Berry was a DJ at Hacienda, but he was also a hairdresser, and they used to call him Hairdresser to the Stars. He'd do Johnny Marr's hair and Morrissey's and Sandy Shaw's, and then he was always doing Chrissy Hines' hair, and he was just it was just such a fabulous time, to be around those people. And Andrew Berry, obviously he was a DJ, but he was such a big influence with, the music that he played there. And that was the thing about the Hacienda, you'd have different DJs each night of the week, and they all had their own, sound that they were into. So if you went every night like me, you heard everything that was possible, really, like every genre. And there was a lot on the Saturday night. It was like soul and funk. So, I heard the likes of Parliament and Funkadelic, stuff like that, I'd never heard of before. So yeah, it was great. It was great times.
Yeah, it sounds absolutely incredible. So, like you've said, lots of musical experiences with different bands that you were in. Sister Lovers comes around. So I guess tell us a bit about that band. So I guess you start to make a bit of momentum, and then you...
So Sister Lovers, that basically came about. It's quite a good story, so I might as well tell you it.
Go for it, yeah, absolutely.
So Sister Lovers, the core of Sister Lovers was me and my friend Lorraine Haywood. And we bought our guitars and we were like, right, this is it. We're going to be serious musicians. None of this just singing at the front and trying to look cool. We're going to learn an instrument, And so we bought these guitars, and I had some money off, like an aunt, great aunt had left me some money. So I bought like a Rickenbacker 330, and I bought like a Vox amp with blue speakers in, which I went to the Wirral to buy, and it was actually off someone out of Half Man Half Biscuit. So yeah, and it was, it was like really sought after, this amp, because it had like the valve speakers in it. So basically, I had the John Lennon set up, but unfortunately, I wasn't as talented as him. But anyway, and yeah, so it was me and Lorraine. We started writing songs, and we had a 4-track. And before we got the guitars, we'd been on a sound engineering course, so we worked out how to use a 4-track. And so we started writing a set of songs. And then in the meantime, we were working in this pub in Cheadle Hulme. And so we were both working one night, and Liam Gallagher came in with his friends. And straight away, you noticed him, cool haircut. It was like this pub was like the only pub for miles that had all the TV screens in and had like, you could put videos on. So it was like quite a young person's pub. So they'd driven up from Burnage, because this was like about 3 miles away from Burnage. And he came in the pub, and I remember my friend Lorraine fancied him. I had a boyfriend at the time, so I'd probably fancied him. And anyway, years ago, you used to get these guys that walked around pubs selling red roses for £1. So we got one of those, and I went up to Liam and I just said, oh, this is off me mate. And he was like, right, okay, and anyway, he noticed that I had some cool trainers on, so he was like, oh, where'd you get your trainers? So at the time, my boyfriend had a trainer shop in Affleck's Palace in Manchester. So I said, oh, it's my boyfriend's shop. He sources all these vintage trainers, and he's like, oh, that's brilliant, I've got to meet him. So anyway, we all got talking. He was like with about 4 friends. And then he said, oh, do you want a lift back? Because I lived in Burnage at the time as well. And so did Lorraine. So I was like, said to Lorraine, I don't know, because she was on her motorbike. So she was going back on her own. I said, I really don't know whether to get a lift with them, because I think they might be joyriders from Wythenshawe or somewhere, like they're a bit rough, aren't they? Anyway, I just took a risk, and they were fine. And we all went back to our house. And then my boyfriend was there. So him and Liam just sort of hit it off, talking about trainers till about 2 a.m. And that's how I met Liam. So fast forward like 6 months, he came round to, I'd moved house then, and he came round to my new flat, and me and Lorraine were in the bedroom, recording on our 4-track. And we said, oh, Liam, come and listen to this song we've written. So he came in, and he was like, yeah, it's not bad, that. He said, why don't you come and share the practice room with us, with Oasis at the boardwalk? So we were like, oh yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah, let's do it. So we didn't have a band, there was just me and Lorraine. So for a while, we used to get Tony Ogden, that was the singer out of World of Twist, to come and play drums for us, because we didn't have a drummer or a bass player. So he'd come down and play drums, and we didn't even have a mic stand. We used to put like a mop in a milk crate and just gaffer tape the microphone on. I mean, it was real punk rock, you know what I mean? And Tony Ogden was quite into it. He'd sort of be dead supportive and just say, yeah, keep going. And I mean, I don't really know what we were doing or what songs we were playing at the time. I can't remember, but so that's how it came about to share the room with Oasis. I did know Noel anyway from, going to gigs. So, yeah, so it was quite a fun time, really. But to be honest with you, we only saw them really when we were swapping over, because we'd wait outside the room and wait for them to finish. And then we'd go in. I mean, we borrowed like bits of kit and stuff. And me and Lorraine always, like, Noel had about 5 guitars in there, so when he wasn't there we used to get them out and dick about on them. But I'm sure he won't mind now. I'm sure he's got about 5,000 guitars. So yeah, so and we went to see them when they played at the Boardwalk, because it was just upstairs basically from the practice room, and we'd be supportive of each other. So yeah, a weird thing happened as well, because all this time I was still friends with Alan McGee, who I'd met like sort of late 80s, 89 at Hacienda. And we'd kept in touch, and he'd come up every now and again. And so one time he was up with one of his bands that was playing at the Boardwalk, and I was like, oh, let's go down to the practice room and chill out. And so I remember him sitting at Tony McCarroll's drum kit, and just on the stool, and he was like, who are this band? Because there was like a Union Jack up. They'd always put this Union Jack up on the wall, which we'd always rip down, because we were like, what's this, like NF or something? Like, you're not having a Union Jack up. At the time it was like early 90s, it wasn't like a cool symbol to, a cool flag to have up on the wall. So he was like, what's this band? And I said, oh, they're called Oasis. And he was like, oh, what are they like? I says, oh, they're fascists or something like that, because they had this Union Jack on the wall. So he left thinking like it was some oi band that we were sharing the room with, So that was quite weird, that he'd like been in the practice room before he met them.
And then obviously you play a major part in him actually meeting them, right? So you get a gig, if I remember rightly, in King Tut's, and in...
Yeah. So when we were at the Boardwalk, we used to go upstairs and just watch the bands for free. So there was this band on, Afghan Wigs were on, and they were really cool. But the band that was supporting them was called Boyfriend, and they were on Alan's label. So we were hanging out with Boyfriend, and I said to Derek, I said, oh, how about next time you play in Glasgow, we support you, because the thing was, you couldn't get a gig outside of Manchester. It was nothing like it is today. You couldn't even ask a promoter. They just wouldn't be interested. They think, well, if I want a support band, I'll just get one from, the town that I'm in. So Derek was like, yeah, come and support us. So they had this gig lined up on the bank holiday in Glasgow, and they'd got in touch with us and said, you're first on. So anyway, as I said, we'd always wait for Oasis to finish up and we'd be going in. So I just remember walking in, and Noel was like putting his guitar away, and I walked in, and I was quite cocky then. So I was like, oh, we've got a gig. And he's like, where? I went, Glasgow, like that, to really showing off, like I was playing Glastonbury or something. And he's like, I don't know what it was. It must have been like the way he looked at me or something. But I just sort of said, like, knee-jerk reaction was like, well, why don't you do it? And that was that. That's how it came about. And then after that, there was other connections, like the guy that did their sound, Coyley, had worked with Teenage Fan Club, and he knew people in Glasgow. And I think it got arranged sort of behind the scenes that they would go up. So they hired like this big gold bus and got there in style, and we hired a Salford van hire and all went in the transit van on a mattress in the back, and they're all there like rock stars turning up in this big splitter van. So that's how that happened.
Yeah, and obviously you played a massive part in that. I guess when you look back now, I guess it's a fairly obvious answer, but I guess be surprised at what they went on to be.
Yeah, because to be honest with you, like I definitely remember thinking like about Oasis that obviously I'd been around, the whole, as they call it now, the Manchester scene, with Happy Mondays and Stone Roses and In Spiral Carpets and all those bands. And, Happy Mondays were always ones to be sort of wearing big coats on stage and really like had that casual look and into football and quite laddie. So really it was if you were in Manchester and you'd experienced that whole scene, you were kind of like, well, we've already seen this, it's just a kind of repeat of those bands that have already been and gone, not been and gone, but they've got bigger and moved on kind of thing. So yeah. And also, they used to sound very different. There's the whole story about them going and recording a demo with the Real People. And I know for a fact that they did change the sound after that, that recording session. And I do think like the Real People, which is a good thing, influenced them. And obviously, Noel's a great songwriter, but he really, through recording with them, I think he really honed his craft there. And previous to that, you'd kind of hear, when we were waiting outside, you'd hear that, Noel playing like 7-minute solos and stuff like that. And it sounded quite like U2 style of guitar playing as well, because obviously he's a big U2 fan. And he had like this Zoom, which was like a guitar effects box. And, it just was like a different sound, really. And I think, obviously, it's just early days, isn't it, when bands are getting sound and exploring different sounds, I suppose, or, influences. And you've got 5 people in a band, so it sort of takes a while for it to, to sort of nail it and decide what it is you're doing musically, because I think Noel hadn't been in the band that long, really. So I think there was a big shift when he joined anyway. So they obviously going through like different stages with the songwriting. But I remember hearing that demo, and that was the one that they gave to Alan McGee. And he signed them before he'd even heard it anyway.
Yeah, so. I think he definitely owes you a pint or two. I'm sure he's bought you many a drink.
Well, neither of us drinks. He's bought me a Coca-Cola for sure.
All right,
yeah.
Fair play. Yeah. So I guess everyone knows how the Oasis story ends up. In terms of your story though, Debbie, Sister Lovers, I don't think you released anything, did you? When I was doing my kind of research, it was quite hard to find anything.
No, we didn't. Like, we were together about 2 years, so I think we only lasted about 6 months after Oasis got signed. The problem with having girls in a band is they argue a lot. So, like blokes, like men, I know it's generalising, but men just sort of get on with it, whereas women will share how they're feeling. And, so it didn't really last very long. After that.
And were there any more bands for you after that, or was it at the point where you started to focus more on the photography once that had finished?
I was in a band after that called Slot Machine, but it was never the same, really. It's like, in hindsight, you realise actually Sister Lovers was a good band, and it was, if we'd have stuck at the songwriting and the work that we were putting in, because we did used to go to the rehearsal room a lot, and we worked quite hard. It takes a while, doesn't it? Any of your favourite bands, if you look at their history, they've probably been together about 4 or 5 years before they actually write something of worth a lot of the time. Unless you're a genius, but because you're learning your instrument as well as the songwriting aspect, and you're working out people's strengths and things like that. So I think really, if we'd have stuck it out, I think something would have happened. But to be honest with you, it's only in hindsight you see that. When you're a kid, you're just like, oh well, I'll try this now, try this for a bit. It's you haven't got like the foresight to stick with it, really.
Absolutely. So I guess why photography then for you? I guess you come out of music, and why photography? I guess you spoke a bit about your dad being a photographer that probably has had an effect on you, but I guess why? What was the appeal of taking that up?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I only started doing photography in the last 10 years ago. And that's when, at the end of the 90s, I had my son, and then I met my husband who had two children. So I effectively brought up three boys. And so when they were younger, I wanted a job where I could spend a lot of time with them. So I was a teaching assistant. And that meant I got the holidays and actually really love working with children as well. But then what happened was I gave up drinking and had like this, crazy sort of awakening. And I realised that I needed to do something creative. And I thought, I'd sort of gradually been getting into photography. I was working with a friend of mine, Stella, and helping her. She'd written a play, and I was doing some promo photography for that. And, I just had a little digital camera, but I thought, hey, you know what? I'm actually all right at this, even if it's on this little camera. And then from there, when I gave up drinking, I went to Stockport College. Like I did a night school class once a week and just got really into it like that. And then I thought, well, the best place to go for me to take photographs is a gig. And I thought, if I go to a gig, I'll be fine that not having a drink because I've got my camera. I can go on my own. I just look like I'm a photographer, so I don't even have to talk to anyone. So it's like a win-win situation. Stay off the booze, but do something creative. So that's how I started out. And actually to do photography, gig photography, it's quite hard because obviously in small clubs and venues, the lighting's, pretty much non-existent. So you really do like learn how to use the camera, and it's really fast paced and the lights change a lot. So it was a really good sort of grounding in photography to start there. And I would encourage anybody just to, if they're interested in taking it up, it's probably one of the best places to go to learn your skills and learn how to use the camera, and at a fast pace as well. But for me, I really enjoyed doing like the promotional photography because it's not more creative, because you can be creative with live photography. But I like the idea of, listening to the band's music, talking to them about their influences, the whole process of getting to know musicians and then, working quite closely with them to produce an image that represents their music, not just I'm a photographer and I will, put my style onto you. I'm not really about that. I'm more about the music and what that conjures up in my head and what sort of image I can create for the band, but working alongside them as well. So I think it's a natural progression in a lot of ways, because when I look back on being in bands and loving music, it's without even knowing, it's as a visual learner and as a visual person, it's all I've been doing for my whole life is looking at these bands and these artists in a visual way, I suppose. So it's kind of, I think it's hardwired to a certain extent, for me to have that creativity.
Absolutely. Like you said, you've been going for 10 years, which is a long time. I guess in the world of photography, I guess it's probably not as long as what people think. And you've been published in various publications. I'm sure people probably listening to this have probably seen a few of your photographs and not realised it's you, whether it's Enemy, Kerrang or anything that they've read. And along with the clients, I guess you must be delighted with the way it's gone and the way you've kind of built up your resume and your career in photography.
To be honest with you, I haven't worked with many big names. I really haven't. And I'm not that interested. Obviously, like if Noel sort of knocked on tomorrow and said, do you want to do portrait, Debs? I'd be like, yeah, of course. But I'm not. The thing with that is there's a lot of pressure and not much time. So there's less room for creativity in those situations. It's like, here's the brief and you've got 20 minutes, you know. So it's not that appealing to me. I did get a mad job though. Like, I don't know if you've seen on my Instagram that I did it's the only magazine cover I've ever done. And it's for The House magazine, which is Parliament's monthly magazine. So it's like you couldn't get much sort of less rock and roll. But they did ask me to photograph Andy Burnham. So, you know, he's a little bit rock and roll, isn't he? So I've no idea where they got my contact details from, because it's like, why are these people getting in touch with me? You know, you look at my Instagram and it's just like, you know, you couldn't get more rock and roll on there, or my website. So, but I think maybe it was the music side of Andy Burnham, and they thought, oh, we need to get a music photographer, but I couldn't sort of tempt him to wear a leather jacket and wear eyeliner or anything, you know.
You've mentioned your website and your Instagram. I always like to give social shout out. So let's plug the Instagram and the website. So where can people find the website and your Instagram page?
Yeah, so my website, I have got two websites. I've got A Supreme Shot, which is .com, which is my music website. And then I've got Debbie Ellis Photography, which is a bit more, not corporate, because I don't do anything corporate, but it's more like portraiture and headshots and things like that on there. And then on my Instagram, it's Debbie_Ellis_photography. So, but Instagram's probably the best place to find me and message me, you know.
Absolutely. You are on Twitter as well, aren't you?
I am. I don't really go on there that much. There's a lot of interesting stuff on there, but there's just so much.
All right.
I'm on Instagram. I'm a visual person. It's the only place you're going to be, really, if you're a photographer.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I guess to take it back to the music then, anything at the moment, Debbie, whether it's new or old, that you're listening to? There's lots of great music currently out there. I mentioned the Pet Needs album, the Cast album, that's still in my headphones. What are you listening to at the moment, Debbie, whether that's a new act or an old act? What are you listening to?
Yeah, so last week I discovered a new band, and I think they are fairly new, and they're called Glass Beams. Have you heard of them?
No, it doesn't ring a bell with me.
They're from Melbourne in Australia, and they're like sort of Asian influenced funk rock mix. I don't know how. I've only listened to about 4 songs by them, but it's like chill out music, you know, real Eastern influence, beautiful music, and they look amazing. Like, I'd love to photograph them. They wear like these gold knitted, sounds really weird, gold knitted masks, so you don't see the faces at all. And they all wear like brown and gold, like sort of brown jumpers or gold waistcoats, and they just look fabulous. And I'm going to see them. They're in Europe at the moment, and they're only doing like a handful of gigs. So they're on in London, and I thought, last time I went to London, it cost me 600 quid. I went to see Johnny Eccles, who is the guitarist from the 60s band Love, and I've been to see him loads, and he used to go and see Arthur Lee as well. And it cost me £600 to go with my husband. It's £400 for the hotel and £100 for the train fare. So had a look at where Glass Beams are playing other than London, and I thought, oh, Amsterdam, Berlin, right, I'm going to have a look at Berlin. So I'm going to see them in Berlin, because I can actually go to Berlin for 2 nights for £260 in a really nice hotel and see Berlin while I'm there. And 2 weeks ago, I went to see Depeche Mode in Amsterdam, because that was really cheap as well. So I'm just doing Europe gigs now. You know what I mean? It's the thing to do.
Amazing. I had a mate who's gone to see Depeche Mode in Prague last week. Yeah. And I said it was amazing.
It was. I mean, they were a contender for the festival, but because I saw them 2 weeks ago, I've binned them off. Yeah. But they were brilliant. That honestly, that tour, that set they do is just fantastic. I just love them so much.
Yeah, fantastic band, great catalogue of music, and still coming up with the goods
Yeah.
in terms of what they're creating now. Let me take you back, Debbie, then to what your first single was and what your first album was and your experience of buying them. Do you remember what they were and buying them?
Yeah, so my first record I ever bought, I was about 8 years old, and my dad had a photographer's shop, and 2 doors down there was a junk shop, and I bought a Monkeys album, Headquarters, I think it was called. And I bought that. I was about 8, obviously because I'd seen them on TV on a Saturday morning and just was like totally in love with them. I just thought the music, obviously they're like the Beatles, but the music and the fact that it was, filmed in America with all the big, Cadillacs and, sunshine. It was just another world. So I bought that. And the reason I bought that as well, it was signed on the front, right? So I was like, oh my God, I've got a signed copy of the Monkeys Headquarters, like 8 years old, playing it, at home. Anyway, as I got older and I still had this record, I realised that some kid had their autographs were on the back as well, as part of the printed sleeve. So I realised when I got older, some kid had probably just flipped it over and like copied what was on the back. So it wasn't a signed album. But and then my first single was War Is Over.
Wow.
When it was reissued after John Lennon was murdered. Yeah. And I remember being really upset about that, obviously, because I grew up with the red and blue Beatles albums at home. And I was about 13, and I just remember being really upset about that. And I think they re-released it, actually, for that. And it was number 1 at that Christmas. So that was my first single.
Great stuff, great memories there, Debbie. And this podcast is all about you collating your fantasy festival. Are you a big fan of the festival format? Have you been to many festivals?
I did when I was younger, but to be honest, there wasn't that many festivals, was there? Like, in the 80s. So I went to memorable ones, 89. Alan got me in, and one of his bands were on, but New Order were headlining. And me and Alan were walking across this field, and that's when Alan met Noel Gallagher, because we were walking across this field and Noel was with this girl that worked at Alan's office. So she introduced Noel to Alan. Obviously, I knew him anyway. And then I just remembered that whole festival. It was like you just went down on the train. We didn't have anywhere to stay. And we were hanging around, like my friend worked for New Order, so we were hanging around at the hotel, but we couldn't get in there. So we saw this like minibus, and we were like, oh, there's a window open. Maybe we should. It was just like me and 2 other girls, and we were like, maybe we should just try and get in that minibus and have a kip in there. Anyway, we were like sort of eyeing it up and walking around, and it had one of those sun strips on the front window that said the Pogues. So we were like, oh my God, you can't break into Shane MacGowan's tour bus, can you? So I was like, no, we're not doing that. Anyway, we found this derelict house with an armchair in it, so we just stayed in there. So we got light. Oh, the things I remember.
Amazing memories. But
I went to Glastonbury in '95 when the Stone Roses were meant to headline, and Oasis were on. I think that was the second time they were on. And I was just really I was depressed because obviously the news came that the Stone Roses weren't going to play and Pulp were playing instead. And I just wasn't that into Pulp, and compared to having the Stone Roses on, it was just really disappointing. I think John Squire had fallen off a bike or something. So, but yeah, so I tried to get on, I was invited to go on stage to watch Oasis. It sounds like I'm some sort of hooligan, which I'm not. I was actually invited to go on stage, and I was with my friend Jane and Robbie Williams. We all walked on. We weren't with him, but we all walked on together. And I don't know why, I just sort of went a different way. I knew the bouncer got me and threw me off the stage. So I ended up in the backstage bit, which we were, because my friend had managed to get her camper van in, So I got thrown off the stage and I wasn't allowed to watch it. I couldn't be arsed going around the front. So I just ended up playing frisbee with the Black Crows, and because they were runners.
As you do.
And then I even ruined that because I threw the frisbee and it ended up on one of the, the porter cabins, the dressing rooms. And they were like, oh man, sort of like, oh, what's she done now? And I was like, right, I'm on my own again. So I just went into one of the dressing rooms and opened a bottle of champagne, so it was okay. I think it was the Oasis dressing room. So,
do you know what? Your experience of the Oasis story and playing frisbee with the Black Crows is probably better than the music that you might have been watching. So it sounds like you had a result there.
I know, and they're touring again. So my friend said about going to see them, because I did see them in the 90s and I do like them. I think they're great. So yeah, I might go and see them. But yeah, I think Glass Beams are fantastic, and I want to go and see them in Berlin. And there's loads of new bands, isn't there? It's hard to keep up sometimes.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've learned from this podcast is there's so many great new bands out and about. They're just waiting to be found, whether it's on Spotify, whether it's on social media that leads you into them. It's a great time to be a music fan, but very hard to get your music heard, I think.
Yeah,
unfortunately. So yeah, long may that continue though. So like I said at the top of the episode, this podcast is all about getting our guests to collate their fancy festivals. So Debbie gets the honour of choosing any 5 acts, one of whom must play one of their studio albums in full, and an encore, which can be any song that all 5 acts that she picks can perform together to close her fancy festival. So it's all very simple. 5 acts take 5 time slots. So for example, in the last episode of the podcast, I had Johnny Marriott on from Pet Needs. He created his Ibiza in Winter fancy festival as follows. So in his opening act, he picked X-Ray Specs. In his Super Seconds act, he had the Sex Pistols and picked them to play Nevermind the Bollocks. In his Midway Madness slot, he actually picked Pulp, who Debbie wasn't that impressed with when they got replaced with the Stone Roses. In his pre-headline act, we had a first-time pick for Pete Tong and the Heritage Orchestra. And in his headline slot, Johnny picked Elvis Presley. And for his encore, he had all 5 of those acts performing Unchained Melody. So very simple. But before we get to pick your 5 acts, Debbie, you get the responsibility of giving your fantasy festival a name and a venue. So Debbie, what are you going to call your fantasy festival?
Right, I did have another name before I came up with this one, but I just thought, I'm from Manchester, I need to go with this one. My other one was called Sun Machine, and it was going to be in Albania. But then because I'm just sick of like miserable weather. But then I thought, no, I'm going to keep it northern. I'm going for, and someone's going to rip this off because I think it's a great name for a festival. I'm going for Mersey Paradise.
Like it. All right, so we've got Mersey Paradise, and you can hold it anywhere. I'm guessing by the name you might hold it at a certain location, but you can take us anywhere in the world, Debbie. So where do you want to hold Mersey Paradise?
I know, well, I was thinking like this Albania thing because my son went to a festival there and it's meant to be absolutely stunning. But I think I'm going to go for like Didsbury down the road, like Fletcher Moss Gardens, which is near the River Mersey. So it's not a very big place, but there's only 5 bands on, so I think the infrastructure will work.
All right, we're doing it. So we've got Mersey Paradise taking place in Didsbury. So before we talk about your 5 acts, then Debbie, you've mentioned loads of great acts who you've had the pleasure of playing frisbee with or been chucked off the stage with and who you've seen. Any acts who you want to shout out who aren't making it into your 5, but you love nonetheless?
Yeah, I mean, God, there's a whole list, the Smiths, because I never saw them. I absolutely love the Smiths. Sonic Youth, MC5, Stone Roses, Depeche Mode, haven't made it, Bikini Kill, Peaches, Portishead, The Lars. I mean, it's just such a shame. All of them can't be on.
It is. I guess that's the beauty of having 5. I mean, you mentioned some amazing bands. I'm surprised you haven't seen the Smiths. In terms of kind of the era you were knocking around with, and obviously you knew Johnny Marr's hairdresser at the same time.
Well, my friend Tina Street, who I've known for over 40 years, she went, and I was really, really jealous. But it was at the Hacienda, and I don't know why I didn't go. But the only saving grace was the next day she said it was awful. She got pissed out of her head and was sick on someone's neck. So I thought, oh, actually, I probably would have been the same, so I'm glad I didn't go.
Yeah. All right.
But, yeah, she was sick on the stairs on someone's neck or something. Oh. So, yeah. But, yeah, so they're all the ones that... And Portishead, like, they were on at Glastonbury in 1995, and I walked... It seemed like, I was in the backstage bit. I was very privileged, didn't do much walking. But I thought, no, I'm going to take this long and winding road to see Portishead. And they were on in a tent somewhere, and it seemed like miles and miles, and there was herds and herds of people. And you could not get anywhere near, because that's when they just blew up that year, wasn't it? And I mean, that just would have been an amazing gig to see, but I didn't get to see them.
All right, okay. So lots of great acts aren't coming with us. Like we've said, we can only take 5. So 2:00, Debbie, at Mersey Paradise. Lovely day in Didsbury. We're going to have nice weather because we can make fantasy weather as well. So it's going to be a lovely day. So who are you going to have, Debbie, open your fantasy festival?
So I'm going to have Psychedelic Rockers, Goat.
Oh, Goat. All right. Okay.
I love Goat. Yeah. I've seen them in London. I only seen them once. Like the gig they played up here last year was sold out. They only played at Gorilla. I couldn't believe it. It's tiny. So, yeah, they're just absolutely amazing live. There's like about 10 of them in the band, and the 2 women that do the vocals, I mean, they must be like Olympic athletes, the way they move for the whole hour and a half, and they're shouting, chanting, they're just going for it. It's just absolutely mind-blowing how good it is.
So Goat, first time Goat have ever been chosen as a fantasy festival act, Debbie, so you're breaking new ground. I kind of know a bit about Goat because one of my old workmates is in a band called Teeth of the Sea, who are on the same label as Goat. I think they've supported Goat a couple of times.
Are they on Sub Pop?
Couldn't tell you what the actual label is, really, but I know Goat. I think Goat have got some new material coming out soon because I think they're touring again.
Yeah. They are, yeah. They're on in, I think they're on in Manchester at the new Century Hall in October, so I'm going to get a ticket for that. Or the end of the year sometime, yeah, because I missed out on the last one. But like I say, they're just absolutely... Can you imagine that? Sunny day, afternoon, Go, are your opener. That's just... Who needs drugs?
Absolutely. All right, so Go are your opening act. They're going to play Mersey Paradise from 2 till 3. Great opening act. So we're going to take a half-hour break, and that'll take us to 3:30. Then it'll be time for your super seconds act to come out, Debbie. So who are you going to have for your super seconds?
So... This might be a bit of a shocker, and I don't reckon they've been on at this festival, been mentioned on your fantasy festival before, although they are a massive band. They're called Turnstile. Do you know them?
It rings a bell, but I couldn't tell you what.
They're hardcore punk rock from America, Baltimore, apparently they're from. See, I've only just got into them, even though they've been going for about 10 years. So they've got this album called Glow On, and they've got like big singles after that called Mystery, Blackout, just absolutely amazing. But you call them hardcore punk rock. They are a bit, they've got, songs that are 2 minutes long, like proper thrashy ones. But I think this last album that I've got into, it's got like real melody to it as well. It's like, like Nirvana had the melody. It's definitely like that, more like that than just like thrashy hardcore. I wouldn't really call it hardcore, but I think they do, or in the past they've done a lot of hardcore stuff. So, but yeah, they're worth checking out. And I saw on Twitter, even though I don't go on very much, I saw Andy Bell retweeted a Turnstile video, and he put something like, oh, thanks to whoever for alerting me to this. I was trying to work out which band it was, and he's just got onto them as well. So yeah, they're really cool.
Oh, brilliant. I look forward to checking out Turnstile. Like you said, never been picked on the Fantastival podcast before, so 2 and 2 for your first 2 picks in terms of making new headway into the podcast. So they're going to play from 3:30 to 4:30. We'll take another half-hour break, then it'll be time for your Midway Madness slot, Debbie. So who are you going to have in your Midway Madness slot?
So my midway has got to be, it's called Mersey Paradise, so it's not the Stone Roses, but I'm going to have one band that are located near the Mersey, so I'm going for Echo and the Bunnymen, because I saw them years ago, like in the 80s, and I've always been a massive fan, and I saw them a couple of years ago with Alan, actually. Alan was DJing on their tour, and they're just absolutely amazing. Like that, it's the same. It's the Depeche Mode thing, isn't it? The catalogue, it's just there. It's like, I think they're going on tour again, and it's just they're just mind-blowingly good. And I've got to say, Ian McCulloch, I mean, it's a hard one between Ian McCulloch and Dave Garn, to be honest. Like, who is the coolest? And you've got the opposites. Like, Dave Garn does not stand still. He dances, he's like, I don't know if he's been to the Royal Ballet recently, but he's like, properly primed for that, sort of front man, giving it loads. Whereas Ian McCulloch doesn't do a lot of moving. He wears the glasses, he's got the long overcoat on, but he is one of the coolest people ever to be in a band.
He certainly is. I think Liam takes a lot of influence from Ian McCulloch. I think you can really see that.
Well, he moves a little bit more than Ian, doesn't he? He sort of does his 1-2 up to the mic.
Yeah. I definitely feel there's a Liam influence, or Liam's taken a certain amount of influence from there.
Yeah.
All right, great shout. Echo and the Bunnymen playing in your midweight man slot. 4th time they've been chosen on the podcast, so great shout there. We'll take another half-hour break, so we've got 3 down. We've got 2 acts to go. Your pre-headline acts are going to play from 6:30 to 8 o'clock, Debbie. So who are you going to have follow your first 3 acts?
I think this one's probably been on before, but this imagine seeing this would blow your mind. Talking Heads, and I think I'd say that. Oh, do we do the album yet or not?
Yeah, you can do the album, not a problem.
Yeah, I think because I went to see Stop Making Sense. Obviously, I saw it when it first came out, but I went and saw it recently, and I know that's a film that became an album. So, but I'm going to say that's the the album start to finish that I would like them to do. Stop Making Sense.
Yeah, you can have that. That's no problem at all. No problem at all. 6-time Talking Heads have been chosen. Recently it had Peter Hooton on from The Farm, and he chose them in his Super Seconds act as well. So
was it? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Cool. Yeah. All right.
Oh, Peter Hooton, he's great.
Yeah.
He's got great taste.
He certainly has, and The Farm is still going and making great music as well, and still playing live, which is great to see. Yeah, he's a lovely fellow. Yeah, he was only on back in January, only a couple of weeks ago, and really kind of loving life and ready for kind of the next step of The Farm. But you've got something in common when you see him next. You both picked Talking Heads for your fantasy festival.
Yeah, I wonder if we picked the same headliner.
All right, let's see. Let's find out. So Talking Heads are going to play Stop Making Sense for us from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. We'll take one more break, and that'll take us to 8:30. It'll be time for your headline act, Debbie. You get 2.5 hours at Mersey Paradise. So who are you going to have, Debbie, headline your fantasy festival?
Well, this is just such an amazing artist, and I've never forgiven myself for never ever seeing this person live, and I'd never be able to see him live now because he's not with us anymore, but he is at the Fantasy Festival. Prince.
Great shout with Prince. I'm like you, I had a chance to see him live and I didn't, at the Roundhouse in London, and I think that was one of his last gigs in London before he passed away, unfortunately, and I massively regret that, Debbie.
Yeah. All my girlfriends went. I think it was like probably about 89, 90, something like that. And I didn't get a ticket. It's when he did a show in the Round, a big arena. I don't even know where it was now. But they all came back, and they all came back to the flat, and they were just buzzing and buzzing and buzzing. And it was just, ever since, I'm like, I can't believe I never got to see Prince. And I just absolutely love him as an artist. He's just, wow, no one comes close, really, as a musician, songwriter, for me anyway. So, yeah.
Great shout. All right, Prince is your headline act. 9th time Prince has been chosen to play a fantasy festival.
Oh, right, yeah.
I guess unsurprisingly, 3rd time he's been picked out as a headliner. So we're going to have all the hits from Prince. It's going to be a great set. Then at 11 o'clock, Prince is going to welcome back on stage Talking Heads, Echo and the Bunnymen, Turnstile, and Goat. So you got.
I mean, I want to go.
You should be right at the front with your camera, getting ready to capture some of the moment.
Exactly. Imagine, I'd be rich. Yeah.
So, Debbie, they're all looking at you, and you get to tell them what song they can close your fantasy festival with, which can be any song ever recorded, Debbie. So, what are you going to have them play as your encore?
So, again, because it's the Mersey Paradise Festival, you know, I'm thinking I really need, and it's a really tough shout, this one, yeah. I had a few options. I had There's a Light That Never Goes Out. Yeah. I had Love Will Tear Us Apart, and I had Killing Moon. I mean, I just couldn't choose. So in the end, I just went with, you're going to like this one, 24-Hour Party People. Because I heard that the other day. I think it must have been on Sean Ryder's Instagram, and it blew me away, like just hearing it, because obviously like played these songs to death years ago, and you've heard them so much, haven't you? But when I heard it on his Instagram, I just thought, that is just wow. I think I made a comment, it never gets old. It just had me, you know, straight away. I was just like, this is amazing. So imagine all those artists doing that. I would love to hear Prince's version of 24-Hour Party People, because I think I can actually kind of hear it. And before I came on, I was looking at, like, my husband said, can't you get an AI app that would do that for you? So Prince doing 24-Hour Party People. I'm going to research that, and if I can make that happen, I'll send it to you.
Absolutely. All right. I'm sure AI. I'm sure you can do most things these days in AI if you look hard enough and try and find it. All right. That'd be great. I also think Talking Heads and Echo and the Bunnymen doing that would be fantastic, and you could have Goat doing their stuff as well, and Turnstile maybe rocking it up to a certain extent would be mega.
Definitely, yeah. And also, I know it's only 5 acts, but I was wondering if I could have Alan McGee and Ian Brown partnering up as DJing.
Oh, absolutely.
In that hour.
Yes. Yeah, we can do that.
2 of my favourite people there DJing. That just would make it.
Absolutely, you've got that. I mean, I know. Obviously, you know Alan Brown. Do you know Alan McGee? Do you know Ian? Have you met Ian Brown?
Yeah, so I know, like, Ian from years and years ago, really, like, before the Stone Roses got signed. You know, I remember Ian playing me a demo of Waterfall, and they had, like, I think they had about 3 or 4 record labels interested in, or 3 maybe at the time. I know Factory weren't, but I know Rough Trade were interested in them for a bit, and they signed to Silvertone, didn't they? But yeah, I remember him playing me that. And then, I used to see him at the Ritz on a Monday night. And I've got a funny story. I remember he came up to me, and I had like this when I was doing my Edie Sedgwick thing in the 80s. I had like a really short hair, like an elfin sort of haircut. And Trevor Sorby had cut it, who was like this big hairdresser at the time. So it was like this, a bit like a skinhead girl, but not quite as feathery. Anyway, I just remember him coming up to me, just got chatting like that. And then about so Trevor Sorby cut my hair, and it ended up in a hair magazine. And I'm doing like this really weird pose, like this, with sort of earrings and like this profile shot of my face. And my mate Jane Roberts was in it as well. We looked really odd because we weren't models, let's put it that way. And anyway, about 3 years later, Ian Brown came to my flat, and he went, "Hey Debbie, I've got this. I was at the barber's today, and I was looking through this hair magazine, and he'd ripped it out, and he gave me this this page from the hair magazine with a photograph of me with this haircut." And it was like, because it was 3 years later, I was like, "Oh, I'm so embarrassed." Like, yeah, thanks Ian for that.
Amazing. Seems like a really nice guy.
He is. He's lovely.
So we're gonna have Ian Brown and Alan McGee DJing in between acts. They're gonna be amazing. So let's lock your fantasy festival in Debbie. So we've got Mersey Paradise taking place in Fletcher Moss Gardens in Didsbury. Open act, we have Goats, Super Seconds Turnstile, Midway Madness Echo and the Bunnymen. Pre-headline act, we've got Talking Heads who are going to play Stop Making Sense in Full. Headlining, we have Prince. And for your encore, they're all going to play 24-hour Party People. Sounds like an amazing fantasy festival to me, Debbie. You happy to lock that one into our Fantastival vaults?
Yeah, love it. Yeah.
Amazing. All right, that's locked in. So I guess before we bring this podcast to an end, Debbie, what does the future hold for you? So you've obviously spoken about going to Berlin. You obviously love the photography. So I guess is that kind of where you see future and keep progressing with that?
Yeah, I've just moved studio actually. So I've got a new studio in Stockport in Vernon Mill, and it's a better space really. So I've just been having that done up, and that's coming together. I've got a launch for that on the 13th of April, and Rob Fidderman's going to DJ for me actually. And so I'm looking forward to that and just moving forward with the photography. And thing is, I just love it. So I'm doing a job that I love, so I couldn't be happier in that respect.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. I know we shouted out your Instagram and website before, but let's shout it out again in case anyone's forgotten or has been listening and hasn't gone back to kind of get those. So if anyone wants to find you on social media, Debbie, where does anyone find you?
Yeah, so on my Instagram, it's Debbie Ellis Photography. And then I have a music website, asupremeshot.com. And I've got my other website, debbieellisphotography.com.
Great stuff. So that is it, everyone. Thank you for listening to the 156th episode of the Fantastival Podcast. And if you've enjoyed this one, please subscribe. You can give the Fantastival Podcast a review on iTunes, or you can give us a follow on Spotify. You can also rate the show and leave a comment on the episode. That would be much, much appreciated if you do. We are on Twitter, on social media, so if you don't give us a follow, make sure to do so. You can find us at Fantastival P. You can also find the podcast now on TikTok, which has been great fun, actually getting into the world of TikTok. And if you're not on either platform, you can give the podcast an email at fantastivalpodcast@outlook.com. Unfortunately, we don't play music on the podcast, but I'll get some tracks from Debbie about her chosen acts, and we'll make a nice little Spotify playlist. So just scroll down in the episode description and you'll find a nice little link there to a playlist to kind of take you away and get you into the world of Mersey Paradise. So Debbie, a massive thank you for coming on the podcast, being my 156th guest. How have you found it? I know you've mentioned the kind of the pain and the tribulations of collating a fantasy festival, but how have you found coming on the podcast?
Oh, I loved it. I love talking about music, and I think these days I don't really get the opportunity to, chat as much as I have tonight. So it's made my week actually. And like I say, yeah, it was such a hard task collating the festival lineup, but I would love to go to it. So I think I have to listen to the other ones now as well. So
yeah, there's a whole world waiting for you to go and find the other fantasy festival lineup. So that is it. Like I said, I'll be back next week with episode 157 next week. So please make sure to join me. But until then, stay safe, my Fantastival friends. Please continue to spread the word, and that word is Fantastival. Thanks for listening.